Like many of the nation's early presidents, John Tyler was born in Virginia in 1790. He spent many of his early years on his family's plantation, where numerous slaves worked in the fields. When Tyler reached his 20s, he became a lawyer and worked with his father. When the elder Tyler became the governor of Virginia, John practiced law on his own. Before his 30th birthday, he was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates, part of the state of Virginia's legislative body. In 1816, he took a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. Tyler was a Democratic Republican, the dominant political party in the post-war of 1812 years of one-party rule. Yet he was an advocate of states' rights, or the right of the states to run themselves with a minimum of interference from the federal government. He strongly opposed the Bank of the United States. In 1820, when Missouri applied for statehood, Tyler opposed the famed Missouri Compromise, which limited the westward spread of slavery to only select territories. In 1821, Tyler left his seat in Congress and returned to Virginia. He served another term in the Virginia House of Delegates and in 1825 became the governor of Virginia. He returned to national politics in Washington in 1827 when he became a senator from Virginia, a post he held for nearly 10 years. In 1832, during the nullification crisis, Tyler emerged as a key voice promoting states' rights. The incident was one of several which led Tyler to leave the Democratic Party and join the Young Whig Party, founded in opposition to centralized federal power and to the Jackson presidency. During the 1830s, Tyler was a leading Whig in the Senate, even holding the office of President pro tempore of the Senate in 1835. In 1836, Tyler left the Senate. During the 1836 presidential election, Tyler was one of several prominent Whigs who were put forward as potential presidential candidates. Because the party lacked national unity in its early years, no one candidate was chosen, and Vice President Martin Van Buren had an easy time winning the presidency and continuing the Democratic legacy of Andrew Jackson. Tyler's prominence in the party led him to being chosen as Harrison's running mate. Harrison and Tyler were elected president and vice president in 1840. In March 1841, when Harrison was sworn in, he delivered a very lengthy inaugural address. The weather was cold and rainy that day, and Harrison spoke without an overcoat. Several weeks later, Harrison was dead from pneumonia, becoming the first U.S. president to die in office. On April 4, 1841, Tyler became the 10th president of the United States and the first vice president to assume the presidency upon the death of the president, fulfilling the constitutional chain of succession.
John Tyler was in Williamsburg when the news came. He managed to borrow money for the trip and headed back to Washington. Tyler's temporary headquarters was at the lavish Brown's Indian Hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. Here on April 6, 1841, John Tyler met the cabinet for the first time. One Democrat was sitting down with 5 Whigs, dominated by Secretary of State Daniel Webster.
My first act upon arriving in Washington was to call on Chief Justice Tawney. He's visiting in Baltimore and will not return for several days. Judge Cranch is prepared to administer the oath of office for me immediately after this meeting.
Mr. Vice President, I suppose you would tend to carry on the ideas and customs of your predecessor.
Custom, Mr. Webster?
To act as a body with majority rule.
I'm very glad to have in my cabinet such able statesmen as you have proved yourselves to be. But, Mr. Webster, I can never consent to being dictated to as to what I shall and shall not do. I, as president, will be responsible for my administration. The final decision will be mine as president. I hope to have your cooperation so long as you see fit to do this. I shall be glad to have you with me. When you think otherwise, your resignation will be accepted.
Mr. Vice President, there is considerable legal
I
opinion.
am the president.
Mr. Tyler, there is considerable legal opinion that in the death of the president, the vice president will act as president. And John Quincy Adams only yesterday made reference to you as acting president.
Mr. Granger, it is
Mr. Tyler, on Sunday, the cabinet reached the conclusion that you would bear the title of vice president or acting president.
It is my conviction that the Constitution intends that the vice president shall become the president. with all of his rights and duties. The moment William Henry Harrison died, I became the president.
He was sworn in on April 6, 2 days after Harrison's death. Because Tyler was only president as a result of Harrison's death, he was nicknamed His Accidency by political critics and foes. Because of the unprecedented nature of the situation, great debate occurred over whether Tyler had the full powers of the presidency or whether he was simply a placeholder until the next election. Tyler certainly believed that he was president, and he acted accordingly. Among those who were dismayed with Tyler's ascension were congressional leaders such as Henry Clay, who expected Harrison and Tyler to take a back seat to Congress in governing the country. Tyler had no intention of doing so and wanted to enact his own agenda as president. Whereas many Whigs wanted to resurrect the national bank that President Jackson had killed off, Tyler strongly opposed such an institution and repeatedly vetoed any legislation that would bring it back into existence. During the course of the fight over the national bank, all but one of Tyler's cabinet members resigned in protest over Tyler's vetoes. Things got so bad that the Whigs kicked Tyler, the President of the United States, out of his own political party. Whigs in the House of Representatives attempt to impeach Tyler, but to little avail. Tyler also advocated for the annexation of Texas, something that Tyler and many Southerners saw as a positive move for the country and for the expansion of slavery. Tyler's presidency was without successes, though. With the help of Secretary of State Daniel Webster, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty was signed in 1842, settling disputes over the northern boundary of the United States between Maine and Canada. Additionally, Florida was added as a state during Tyler's tenure in office. In 1844, Tyler hoped to run for re-election, but he was a man without a party. That year, the Whigs put forward Henry Clay as their candidate, and the Democrats, Tyler's other former party, put forward James Polk. Tyler tried to run, but withdrew from the race in late summer of that year. James Polk was elected the 11th President of the United States that year. After the presidency, Tyler continued to advocate for states' rights and pro-Southern policies. In 1861, with the clouds of secession and war gathering, Tyler took part in efforts to prevent bloodshed and war. With the onset of fighting in April, however, Tyler was loyal to Virginia and the Southern cause. He was elected to the Confederate Congress in 1861, but because of poor health, he died in early 1862 before he could serve in this capacity.